you would achieve?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think I've tried to do what I always say is national service. That is service to the public. And I've enjoyed it. Basically, I would say that I have been a teacher most of my adult life, and I've enjoyed being a teacher. And it's out of teaching or being in the academic sector that I've had the privilege to do all the different things I have done. Teaching prepared me very well to relate to people in very humane ways. It prepared me also to try to be able to understand people, to be able to understand institutions, how they work, and to operate meaningfully in all of these. And also, I think the profession of teaching, the training college I went to, Commander, and the profession itself, I think, imbued in me a sense of respect for ethical behavior, for doing right with human beings and with society, and maintaining a certain level of self-respect and dignity. And so I think in all of this, I have been lucky also with the kinds of friends, family that I have been blessed with. You mentioned my wife, Rose Mensah-Kuti. She's also been quite an active person in the women's rights movement. You mentioned my friend Nana Kwesi Janapinti, a well-known journalist and whose life I think is not too far from mine in terms of service to the society. So all in all, I think I've been blessed with the kind of life I've lived. I've traveled all over Africa. I think there are just about, just about 10 or 12 countries that I've not set foot in this beautiful and gorgeous continent. And it's all because of part of the national service to Africa. I've been a Pan-Africanist, and I've taken that seriously, and that has shown in the kind of work I've done in the advocacy for press freedom, for human rights, for democracy all over the continent, from South Africa to Egypt to Eritrea to the Gambia to Senegal, and all of that. Teaching too, I've taught in a primary school, I've taught in a secondary school, and I've also had the opportunity to teach in universities. And so I can't ask for more in this short life. I cannot ask for more. I've served, as you said, in the public media. I'm still serving as chairman of the Graphic Corporation company. I still try to help media advance or develop professionally and institutionally. And so, all in all, Jifa, I think I can say that I've done some good national service or public service.
I believe you've left a good legacy, and you've trained many of us as well. I remember being at your retirement party when you left the university, and many of the old guard really who've gone through your hands were there, and your colleagues as well. So the work is out there to see. You say that you're primarily a teacher, but I think many of us post, 2000 in particular, know you as the founder for the Media Foundation for West Africa. And it is the work the foundation has done that has given you a lot of prominence as well, dovetailing, of course, into the area of democracy, human rights, good governance, as you mentioned. But your undergraduate degree, surprisingly for many, will now realize that it was in political science and philosophy. Some will ask, how does that then move you or give you a background to do this whole, work in activism, in media and communications and teaching?
Yeah, the academic discipline, whichever academic discipline you enter into, at least prepares you intellectually if you take whatever you are studying seriously. It prepares you intellectually to understand first the subject matter, to understand society, the area better. But I think that there are many factors that influence your activity in society. You could study any subject matter and just get stuck in that narrow discipline. But if you want to go out of that narrow understanding of education into the larger society, there are other factors. There are many factors. You see, I grew up in an era of Ghana's independence. And many of my generation savored the hope, the aspirations, the new wave of independence and freedom and aspirations. And we were also nurtured on questions of Pan-Africanism, Africa's freedom, Africa's dignity, the African personality, and so on and so forth. And therefore, some of us had the opportunity to be influenced by such ideas and ideals. I mean, when I was growing up and going to school, training college, there were organizations that we joined that also opened our minds and our eyes as young people to the larger society we live in. For instance, I joined the Voluntary Work Camps Association of Ghana, which used to be called, which was short named VOLU in the 60s and 70s. And this was an organization of young students going from village to village, helping construct development projects, community centers, and so on. So every holiday, I just put my bags at home and move on, doing voluntary work. And that exposed us to the society and the needs of people and so on. So some of these things influenced our attitude to society, to politics, and so on. And then when I left this country in 1971 to go and study in the United States, two important political things happened. One, when I got to the US, that was the height of the civil rights movement. And as I said, we had been brought up on Pan-Africanism, what we may call black consciousness, African consciousness, was at the height in the United States. The movement for civil rights of black people, African Americans, and minorities in the United States. Secondly, in 1972, Kwame Nkrumah died. And that was a big thing for those of us who loved and supported Kwame Nkrumah and his ideals and ideas of African liberation, independence, and unity, and so on. And this propelled some of us to start an organization of African students in the United States. I was a part of the founders of what we called African Youth Movement for Liberation and Unity. We worked very hard to mobilize support for liberation struggles in the then still colonized countries of Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Cape Verde, and also for support for the struggles of against apartheid in South Africa. Then in the 70s, as we were doing this Pan-African support activities, the problems of politics in this country under Champon's government also escalated. Students were on demonstrations, workers were on strike, professional people were all over against the military dictatorship under a Champon's government. And the Ghanaians in the United States also mobilized ourselves, and we all formed an association called Concerned Ghanaians for a Better Ghana.
So the Concerned Ghanaians name concept, it didn't start today.
I don't know who stole it from America and brought it here. But these were some of the major political developments that influenced personally my my engagement in political activism. So I left America after my studies and some journalistic work to come here in August 1979, in the middle of the June 4th regime, AFRC regime of Jerry Rawlings and so on. I came here in August when things were very difficult, when this economy was really on its belly. You couldn't even get soap to buy. You couldn't even get toothpaste to buy in this country. Fuel was short, traffic, cars, transport was grounded. I entered here in the middle of gloom, one of the darkest moments in this country's history, economically and even politically. Some of my friends and even some of my family people thought I was crazy leaving America to come here in the middle of this. But I thought, well, if my family people live here, I can also live here. So I came in. Had you
graduated from Columbia School of Journalism by then?
Yes.
Okay.
I went to City College for my first degree, as you said, and then Columbia School of Journalism to do journalism, and then worked for a newspaper in New York called The Guardian. And before I came here, and I came straight away to take an appointment as a lecturer at the School of Communication Studies in Legon in 1979. Yes.
So your family felt you were making the wrong choice, but you felt it was important to come back.
Yeah,
did you come back with the view that you were coming to also help try and lift Ghana out of the dark hole we had sunk into?
Actually, that's why I came in with only my books. My wife will tell you I came with 45 boxes of books. I had no car, I had nothing. The only worthy things I had in my whole package were some cooking utensils I brought from New York. Because I thought that, well, you know, I should go and help. I liked America as a young person growing up in the civil rights movement, and I enjoyed being there because, in fact, recently when there were demonstrations
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter after the murder of what's his name? George Floyd. I was telling my children that, look, if I was in America, I would be in the march, because that's what we use our time for, you know, studying and also being activists. So I always thought that I should be back here and make whatever contribution I could for my country. Was my biggest motivation for coming. So whilst everybody went abroad and came back with cars and this, and I came with just my two hands
books.
And the things that I have acquired in my head.
And your books of your 45
books,
boxes of books. It's the MTN at 25 Bright Conversation. Our guest is Professor Kwame Kakari, and he's the chairperson of the Board of Graphic Communications Group. And he's been telling us a bit about his early life and how he got to the point of becoming an activist. Let's talk a bit about your role in public service. And I know you said that your life's work has been national service to Ghana, to Africa, but becoming a Director General of GBC in a very, very difficult time, 1982 to 1984. Yeah. 1982, I think I was 5 years old. So it was a difficult time because of the revolution, the embargoes that the country had to endure. When you reflect on that time, could it have been different? Would you change anything?
I don't think so. Whatever I have done has been by conscious choice. The things I've done are things I have loved to do. As I said, I came back into this country to help in whatever way possible. And you see, the movements, the student movements on the university campuses had also sort of created fertile grounds for all manner of ideas to emerge. So in those days, there were groups of students, including my friend Nana Kwesi Janapinti and others, who were leftist socialists, mostly inspired by Kwame Nkrumah, but also by other ideas, Marxism, this and that. I had also been part of that trend of social political development. And so, even as a student activist in America, I was in touch, in communication with many of the people in the so-called socialist circles on the university campus. So when I came, I didn't find myself lost. I came in right with them, and then we go. I remember that I got here on August 9th. I reported at the university on a Monday, August 13th or something like that. And then the following day, my friend Akoto Ampao and others invited me to a meeting of their circle. You see, so this circle included people like Kwesi Boche, Chachu Chikata, Fui Chikata, many others, Atta Brichum at Cape Coast and so on, in the middle of the Akila Pasoya and all of that, in the middle of the June 4 AFRC, this and that. And that is through that circle that I met Rawlings, Kojo Chikata, and many of the leaders of the PNDC and so on later on. And so I got really directly involved in what was going on here. I learned from them. I hadn't been in the country for about 9 years. I learned from them. Of course, later on, people like Kwesi Janapinti and others, we met, and being a journalist, people like that, it was natural that we got together, and so on and so forth. So when the PNDC came to power in January 1982, through so many things, Rawlings appointed me as Director General, largely because I think he thought that if I was teaching journalism, then I should be able to manage a media organization.
What was the expectation for that role? What did they expect you to do?
When the PNDC appointed you, there was no paper. There was no directives. All what I remember Rawlings telling me is that, Kwame, you ought to do a good job. That was about it. That was all the instruction.
The reason I ask...
But the feeling of everybody there then was that if I was a supporter of the revolution, I would use the GBC to support the revolution. And in any case, any government, liberal, dictatorial, want the public media to support them, don't they? They all do. Up to today, they all expect the state-owned media to support them and not be critical, even today. Yes.
So that's why I wondered what the expectation was, because you left 2 years after being in that role. Was it because you weren't meeting the expectation of supporting the revolution, pushing out content that glorified the revolution, you know, what some would even call propaganda?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wasn't too keen taking that position. I belong to a political organization called the New Democratic Movement. And when the coup d'etat came, our position was that this is not a revolution, it's a coup d'etat. And so we took a policy called critical support. That is that we will support this regime because we thought there were opportunities for the masses of Ghanaians to move their lives forward, to improve their lives. And therefore, we will support this regime for as long as it was doing things that benefited the masses of the people. So the policy was that nobody should take a position in the executive of the government. That is ministerial appointments and so on. That's the position the New Democratic Movement chose. So there were some who became ministers and so on, E.T. Mensah, Kwesi Botwe, and a few others. But of course, not all of us agreed on that policy. Some of us agreed. So going into GBC was not really in the executive position of government, and because of my background in journalism. But then I tried to do my work well, but it wasn't easy. That's a whole different story.
Interferences
Well,
and the like.
Under the military regime particularly, interference is a mild expression because, you know, it was rough.
They tried to dictate what you should do.
Yes.
And you wouldn't be dictated to.
And in fact, the worst part of it is that it wasn't Rawlings who was trying to dictate to you. He had too many things to worry about than to concentrate on GBC or graphic or this or that alone. The problem was with so many other soldiers who thought that they should dictate to you because you are a civilian. And that was what was worse. Of course, I tried to do my work well. There were a number of coups d'etats during that period. At one time, I think I spent about, Rawlings ordered me in the middle of gunshots on the compound of GBC. He said, don't go anywhere. You are safer being in your office. And then Major Kwashiga also rushed to my office and said, stay put, don't go anywhere. A J-body who was also a warrant officer came and said, Kwame, don't go anywhere, just stay here. So I stayed in the GBC office for 3 days.
Wow.
Without bathing, without this and that. So anyway, it was a very rough time. But journalistically, I respected the staff of GBC for many reasons. I would say they were professional. You see, professionalism is going by the books of practicing journalism. We shouldn't confuse professionalism with critical journalism. You see, people will do a good job as professionals, reporting the news as they see it, organizing programs within the framework of the technical parameters and competencies that are required. So the GBC newsroom, for instance, has some of the best editors, for instance, that I can think of. Mr. Nyankuma, late Nyankuma, and so many others. And in a situation like that, where GBC was virtually another barrack, there were sandbags all over.
There still are.
The military were there, not a platoon, but almost a company. And yet the GBC staff did a good job of at least reporting and presenting information as the PNDC wanted it. There were a few casualties. Many staff had problems because of the problem. If you are a staff at GBC and you were coming in, the soldiers would frisk you with their guns pointed at you. Occasionally, I'm in the office and some staff will come crying for this or that, particularly the women, some soldiers roughing them up in very terrible ways and so on and so forth. So people developed a lot of heart ailments in GBC, and yet they tried to do a good job, and I think they did a good job. So I left, virtually Rawlings dismissed me. He sacked me after 2 years. I don't know why. There was no explanation. He just came to the radio station one day and announced that he was replacing me and so on and so forth. And I left. But actually, I was happy. I was happy that that had come. You see, because when he appointed me, as I said, I belong to a political organization. We discussed it. And the collective felt that I should take it. Because first, he had asked that I go as editor of the graphic, and I had declined it. And so my friends said that, listen, you better take this to avoid any mistrust or this or that. Because, see, when the coup occurred, Rawlings contacted our organization through some of his people to help him constitute the government. That is, bring me a list of names for ministerial appointments, for this, for district secretaries, for this, for that. So we knew that he was relying on us and also on the other group, June 4th Movement, Chris Atim and others, and also other people outside these left organizations for people he would select their, as members of his government. So we knew that that expectation was there. So if you continually decline an offer to serve in this or that position, for military regimes, it's a declaration of war. So I had to take that position a bit unwillingly, but I tried to do my work as best as I could. Let me say that when I went to GBC, and GBC is a huge organization. Today, we don't see it that way. It was a huge organization. It was the only broadcasting organization for this country, a staff of 4,000 and something, with huge transmitter stations dotted in different parts of the country, and with rediffusion stations in every district in this country. It was a huge organization. And my knowledge and experience in managing anything was not beyond serving as assistant foreign editor in a small leftist newspaper in New York, and also managing a classroom at the University of Ghana. This is all the experience in management I knew and I had. But I suppose if you have an open mind and you are willing to learn, it shouldn't take you too long to learn how to manage situations when you are put in them. So I tried to do, but after 2 years, I was let go, but it was also a part of a process of Rawlings and his people getting rid of those they considered to be leftists, who perhaps they felt were pushing the revolution into some realm they didn't like. Remember that within those 2 years, there had been many coup d'etats attempts, some by disgruntled people who had been with Rawlings and so on, and some by others who had not been part of Rawlings' school. So it was part of the getting rid of elements that they thought were not part of the kind of direction they wanted to go. Yeah.
Very interesting, GBC,
Yeah.
and as somebody who's worked in, 3 media organizations, though I've not worked in newspaper, mainly broadcast, GBC, TV3, Joy, or multimedia, I kind of get what you mean. GBC is really a different animal entirely when it comes to media. The topic is promoting professionalism in the era of social media and citizen journalism. And you talk about the professionalism of GBC. Now we have lots and lots of media houses. We've seen a sharp rise in, different kinds of media, print, lots of newspapers, particularly in the late 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of online platforms just balloon. And even at a time where TV, we didn't see too many TV stations, I think in the last decade, TV has seen a certain resurgence.
Oh, yes, yes.
And so we now have lots of digital television, lots of free-to-air, satellite TV. I mean, the range is enormous. And bearing that in mind, there's also the issue of professionalism.
Yeah.
So the professionalism issue is on 2 levels. There's first the general mainstream media, which I've mentioned. What are your thoughts about that before we talk come to talk about social and digital media?
Let me start from when I was in GBC. And again, Ghana Television was established in 1965 by Kwame Nkrumah. It was one of the last development projects he enunciated before the coup d'etat that took him out of office. And it was black and white. By the time I got to GBC in 1982, technically, infrastructure-wise, Ghana Television was on its knees. There was only one functioning camera in the studio. Field production cameras were almost nothing to talk about. And the one studio camera was taped up. If the camera people were not careful, the frame could fall down and then there would be no television. The transmitter was in a bad shape. It was black and white. So when I went to GBC, and again, in the northern sector of this country, there was no direct transmission of television. So when GBC broadcast today, the recording would be flown to Tamale for it to be shown tomorrow to the northern sector. That's how television operated at the time. And television transmission was only 6 hours a day. So the situation was so bad, so I informed the Minister of Information at the time. The engineers told me that, Director, if we are not careful, all television will cease. But you see, for military rulers, maybe even for all politicians, image is so important for them. But more so for military leaders. For civilian rulers, they have their political parties who constantly propagate whatever they want for them in the smallest of villages. For military rulers, they don't have this network of an organization to do their proper. So the television and radio are so important for them. And so for military rulers, to hear that there's no television is like political suicide, because then the people will not be seeing their image constantly. And Rawlings, perhaps like all politicians, loved his image being out there all the time. So the engineer said, if we don't reduce transmission time, all TV will come to a standstill. So I said, so calculate how much this and that will cost. For instance, the cost of diesel to power the transmitters. And remember that Doomsaw didn't start from today. In fact, in 1983, because of droughts and so on, the Akosombo Dam went down below where it could generate enough energy for the country. So there was a reduction in electricity supply. So GBC's transmitters and all that were suffering from that. And the cost of diesel, for instance, we also had external radio services, which had been started under Nkrumah's government to support African independence activities all over the continent.
That was the Radio 1, Radio 2.
Radio 1, Radio 2 were the local stations. Actually, Radio 2 was established after Nkrumah was overthrown. Radio 2 was established, I think, under Buzia or the NLC, I've forgotten, in 68, yes. But apart from Radio 1, Radio 2, which were catering for Ghanaian audiences, the external services were catering for Eastern, Southern, Central Africa, and Northern, and Europe to support the liberation movements fighting for independence in other African countries. And there were two main transmitters, one in Tema and one in Ejura. I visited the Ejura station, I visited the Tema station. The transmitters in these places were consuming 32 gallons of diesel an hour. Ooh. They are huge. Today's transmitters are nowhere near what they were. Of course, they were old also, and so on and so forth. And that was so costly. So I approached the Minister of Information at the time, at Austin, late at Austin, and we went to see Rawlings. So he assembled some members of the PNDC to listen to our report. We had written up the report, the engineer's report, and said, so sir, this is the situation. So he said, so are we going off television? I said, no. The engineer said that we can run television 3 hours a day for the next so many months.
And that was a reduction of 3 hours from the 6 hours?
Yes, from the 6 hours, cutting it by 50%. So after a little while, he said, okay. And you see, it was also difficult for the PNDC government to raise grants and so on from the Western and even the Eastern socialist countries and so on. Luckily, I was invited to a dinner one day by the then Japanese ambassador here. I went to the dinner, and then I also invited him to a program GBC was doing in Rural, Amasaman area there. And when we went to the program, I didn't speak Ga. I could only speak Twi. But I did not also want to speak in English because it was a rural radio program. So I spoke in Twi, and then, in fact, when the GBC man wanted to interpret, the people there said, no, we don't understand Twi. So anyway, after the program, the Japanese ambassador invited me again to his house and said, congratulations. I said, why? He said, since he came to the country, that was the 3rd year, he hadn't seen any public official speak in any Ghanaian language in a public event. And so he's happy because the Japanese, the prime minister, everybody who becomes a prime minister, even the emperor, they've learned English, French, but never will they speak in a foreign language in public. So we became friends. Then one day I told him about, he was complaining about our television, and I told him all the problems. So what happened? To cut everything short, the Japanese government invited me to Japan for a tour. Then afterwards, the ambassador advised that I send a proposal for support. So the Japanese government gave us $3 million grant, not loan, but gift. And that's what we used to transform GBC from black and white to, what do you call it? Color. So it saved the situation. But by the time color came, I had been sacked. But I was happy that at least I had contributed to restoring the organization. So, yeah.
So that added on to a new opportunity for broadcasters. But even then, how many of you here have watched black and white?
No, I don't think.
Maybe.
Have
okay, you? I see someone who is very young.
Maybe, maybe that's when your
museum piece in the house.
Yes, maybe that's when their TV is spoiled.
I ask really because I grew up in Nigeria, and at the time when I came on holidays in the 80s, as kids we would fret about black and white television. Nigeria, they were really advanced, way ahead, and were showing all sorts of things. Sesame Street, which is where I learned a lot of the English I speak. In terms of professionalism, you know, certainly color TV would change the landscape of professionalism. So looking at our mainstream media, are we professional enough?
I'll say that we have a number of media establishments in the country now, I'm talking about the private sector. The public sector, yes, I think there is a high quality of professionalism. As I said earlier on, we should not confuse professionalism with a critical journalistic attitude. Though, if one is professional, it connotes that one would also be questioning certain things. So the public sector media, GBC, Graphic, Ghanaian Times, GNA, and so on, I think display quite some high professional standards. In the private sector, radio and television, we also have a number of establishments that are quite professional. I think with a professionalism that is comparable anywhere you care to look. Then, of course, we have so much which are really nothing to write home about concerning professionalism. And that is to be expected, because all of a sudden there is a boom. And where do you get the professionals from? Professional journalists, like all professional practitioners, are not just there to pick up. They ought to be trained, and once the boom has come within a short time, it's not easy to find them. Plus, many of the people, the business people who have also set up radio and television stations privately, don't have a clue about what journalism is, so they don't care who they employ. When private radio came on the scene, you know, the first line of people who were recruited in many of the stations in the rural districts were young people who used to be operating what used to be called, you know, they used to be operating these PA systems as funeral announcers and announcers in derbas and things like that. I've forgotten the name they used to call them. But those were the people, most of them, that they recruited to the radio stations in the different areas. Of course, a few of them were also started by retired professional practitioners. But otherwise, up to today, still we have a whole mass of radio stations and a number of television stations where the majority of practitioners are not professional and are not doing really good professional work. Even then, I think that with the unprofessionalism and all, my assessment is that media in Ghana have not really produced seriously challenging social or political problems to worry about. For instance, you've not found any radio station promoting ethnic differences or conflicts. You've not found, until elections come, you don't find any significant number of radio stations creating political difficulties between the major political parties, even though, let us admit that a lot of the unprofessionalism has to do with the fact that many radio stations and TV stations are owned by politicians and
politically exposed persons.
Yes, and members of the major political parties and so on. And that is where a lot of the unprofessionalism come from, I think. But as I said, even then, we've not really faced any serious problem of radio or TV creating, you know, the kind of dangers that you might find in different places. Right. But otherwise, the state-owned media, as I said, have a high quality of professionalism. What we might demand from them is to look at the Constitution and the responsibilities the Constitution gives state-owned media. For instance, the Constitution says they should exact accountability from government, public officials, and so on. And I don't see the public media doing much of that, questioning authority, questioning different, what do you call it, policies, and also in there, in the Constitution, is that they must open up to dissenting views. And you rarely find dissenting opinions. That is, opinions that will not be palatable to government, opinions that will not be palatable to established order. You don't find, I don't know if people express these dissenting views to the state-owned media, but the state-owned media don't publish them or what. But whatever it is, even editorially, they could occasionally raise such dissenting views for the public. Those are the demands that and the challenges that I think could help the professionalism of the public media become complete.
All right. Let's take some of your messages that have come through, and just know that MTN will reward us for being participants if we participate actively, both here and online. A message coming in from Eagle FM Wale Wale says, MTN has been great to me so far, except for some instances where I have issues. It says, I commend MTN for their great initiative they've taken to enable us meet Professor Kwame Kakari. I remember when he came to Eagle FM in Wale Wale, I never wanted him to leave. God bless you, Prof. You remember that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Nana Kwade says, professionalism and journalism should be like identical twins. But recently, many journalists lack the element of professionalism. Nash Gordon writes, Prof, with this experience in the political sector, with due respect, can you also bring your political ideologies into Ghana politics? So I'm not exactly sure what he means. Whether with your thoughts now, should you enter?
I should join a political
party.
party.
Join politics. I get a sense that that's what he means. Xavier Dugbe says, Prof, I am a student of the University of Education Winneba from the Department of Political Science Education. Now my question is, how does professionalism and journalism affect Ghana's political system, either negatively or positively? And the final message says, very educative and historical. I'm enjoying the discussion. That's from Musa Seidu. Thank you very much. Please feel free to send more of your messages and I will read them. And when it's time, we'll have a question and answer session. So please prepare your questions as well. But there's one question online where he's asking, how does professionalism and journalism affect Ghana's political system, either negatively or positively?
I think it has, in the Fourth Republic, I think my assessment is that the media have done a generally commendable job in helping our democracy move forward, particularly in the area of helping to maintain stability, peace, and helping keep the country going. The media have also done one thing. You see, whenever a politician or a political party has tempted to do certain things that the public considers not very good, you found a lot of shouting from the media against that tendency. And it has always tended to keep some politicians or political parties in check from going extreme. There are many examples. Again, during elections, when there is a lot of tension, one of the things that has helped us is the media. I remember in some election years, radio stations belonging to NDC and MPP were mobilizing their supporters for violence, to attack GBC, to attack the Electoral Commission, and so on. Why did they fail in actualizing those tendencies. It was all because at the time, during elections, I suspect that even supporters of these political parties don't listen to their party radio stations. They are listening to those radio stations that are considered independent or neutral, whose information are more reliable than the biased party media. You see, so they couldn't, but generally because there is a plurality of media, you cannot mobilize too many of the people with your radio station because people are listening to different media. So the majority don't even hear what you are saying. I think that, therefore, the plurality of media has helped in stabilizing the situation by diffusing the listenership, the viewership, so that it's not concentrated with this or that party media and so on. But you've also found out that by and large, there has been a high level of professionalism by so many media in the coverage of election politics. They've given political parties their platform to sell their ideas to the people. They've given their platforms to the Electoral Commission to educate the public. They've given the platform to party serial callers to insult and attack, and people have responded likewise. You know, so all in all, I think our media have played roles that have helped us move our society forward. Now, ideologically speaking, in terms of the public's understanding of their rights, of democracy, of the issues underpinning democracy, and of questioning government policy, whether it's NDC or NPP, I am not too sure our media have been very, very sharp and as effective. Our media have been tended to be cornered by the politicians and the political parties. So you usually find out that serious discussion don't usually involve academics in the different fields, but involve politicians selling their partisan badges and all of that. But directly to the question, yes, professional journalism, one must inform us adequately and accurately and satisfactorily. Two, professional journalism in a democracy must open the space for different viewpoints to be in the marketplace and for different people to debate around them. Professional journalism must also help mobilize the society to pursue causes that are in the public interest when need be. And in all of this, I think when there's been some disaster, when there's been some national difficulty, I think, take the pandemic for instance, I think our media have done a good job helping mobilize the society to do this or not to do that in order to keep healthy. In some areas, such as violence against women or against this, the media have done a bit, but not enough in my estimation because of the ideological undertones of these kinds of violence and so on. When you take the area of the economy, again, I'm not too sure our media have done well in one area in terms of financial education, you know, so that people learn how to invest well and not be fooled by scammers and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I think generally, yes, professional journalism is needed and should be the underpinning of democracy maturing and moving forward. But journalism being what it is, there cannot be a uniformity in journalism. In fact, that's what we don't want. Precisely because society is made up of different ideas, different beliefs, different tendencies in how we look at things. This color here, I may see it as yellow, somebody may see it as blue. So be it. Yes, we should accept all those and then decide generally whether or not it is blue or yellow. And professional journalism must help us decipher those differences and come to some common understanding of what ought to be. You know, so that's why we must emphasize on professional journalism. But also, journalism becomes more complete when professional journalism is supplemented with critical journalism. Without critical journalism, professional journalism is lame to a very large extent. It doesn't help advance people's preferences when they are not in the majority, because it's not always that the majority is right. The minority viewpoints are also important, even for the majority to look at the other side of the issue. So professionalism must be adequately influenced and supplemented with critical journalism.
And that's a good segue for us to talk about our current era of digital media, social media, citizen journalism. I think the last decade has seen an explosion of one device that is very important to MTN, and that's the mobile phone. I think without the mobile phone, areas of digital journalism, areas of social media journalism or activism or just contribution, and even the latest fad is blogging. Blogging is now, you know, you taught us all these things back in 2004, and I'll be honest, I don't even remember. I mean, what we were taught and what it is now are two really different things. Yeah. I think the current rector of GIG was the one who took us through new media and the like, Professor Kwanzaa Edu. So when you look at social media, blogging, digital media, citizen journalism, what comes to your mind?
Well, what comes to my mind is the expansion of freedom of expression. It is social media because it is really social. For instance, I suspect that every family has a platform on which the members communicate. Every professional organization has a platform on which every group, every ad hoc group that sets up. For instance, Nana Jinapinten and I belong to an organization called High Life is Alive Fan Club. We are trying to promote and sustain and advance high life music. And the club members have a platform on which we share ideas, hold meetings, and all of that. So social media is very important. They've now brought more people, different groups of people together, and they are a basis for social interaction of all kinds. Academic institutions have it, all kinds of think tanks have it, all kinds of economic groups, traders. There are market women trading in tomatoes or this who have it and tell you when the tomatoes are abundant in Tamale or in this place, or where you can find pepper, or where you can find okra or plantains or whatever. So social media is now social. It networks people. It helps people in all manner of social situations. When people are in trouble, friends use the social media
to crowdfund.
Exactly. And if you use it to send money, you know, you may be hard up somewhere, and the social media.
And thanks to MTN Momo.
Well, you know, so that digital means of communication is a wonderful technology. It's a wonderful outlet for for communication in society.
The democratization of media brought on by social media means that all these things you talk about is possible. But there are many who also complain about the significant negativity that has emerged. It's two things. There's cynicism. So you have a lot of people writing in a very cynical, in a very negative manner about our environment, about our people. I mean, I know Nana is on Facebook. I think we are Facebook friends. I don't know whether it surprises you. Are you on Facebook, by the way?
No, I'm not on Facebook.
Are you on Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter. I'm only on WhatsApp.
You are only on WhatsApp, not even LinkedIn?
No, LinkedIn is too boring to use.
But
for me...
No, you see, what I was trying to get to is, much as all the things you've talked about are the very good things, I think the worry for some of us is that people who've not seen Nana painting before, who've not seen me before, they come and write the craziest things, even down to the point of abuse, such that if they were to meet me in this corridor, they would dare not say those kinds of things. I think that's one of the big fundamental problems we have now as Ghanaians, that we see so much vitriolic on social media. It then spills into mainstream media. And therein we come to the topic about professionalism.
Well, first of all, the anonymity that social media provides is what also allows some of these negative things to go on. But is it really new? Before social media, there were rumors. You know, people were peddling rumors about you, about me, about everything. It is what already prevailed that have now come onto this technology to facilitate what already existed.
Or amplify what already
exists. Yes, whatever is going on in all these technologies were there already. They are not new. We were talking, we were speaking, we were producing news, but now we have a technology that is facilitating this better. What happened in the past was that if you wrote a letter to the editor and it was insulting, it was defaming somebody, this is where the professionalism comes in. The editor will either dump it, not publish it, or edit it and refine it so that when you read it and it's about you, you will not feel as offended as now. And so this is where the issue of social media and professional journalism come in. It is only a bad media organization that will take material from social media and don't do any checks, don't do any authentication, and just publish it as such. That would be disastrous. You realize also that institutionalized media, what we call traditional media, are the last resort for so many people in checking the truth. If they see it on social media, they want to verify the truthfulness of it on a radio station, on a TV station, or in a newspaper. Then they will be satisfied.
On the social media platform of these mainstream,
exactly.
On an online, credible online platform.
Exactly, institutionalized, organized media. Let's distinguish that from the social media usage by individual citizens or persons.
But therein comes in the concept of influencers. There are people in our society, they may be a lawyer, they may be a media person like me, they may be a teacher. The latest sensation is Teacher Kojo. And there are all these influencers, and the trend we're seeing now, I don't want to say that those of us in mainstream media feel threatened, but there's a certain trend, even by government, you know, and senior government officials and politically exposed persons, where they have whatever information, they will not share it with the mainstream media first. for you to verify or check or anything. They just go and put it on their social media handles. They may tag a number of people, and then you will see it.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how we can be professional when things like that are happening. And people believe them. So it may be a lie.
People believe them only up to a point. Sooner than later, when what such people put out on the platforms are found to be false or fake, people move away from them. You see, I think that in society, people are not are wise enough, intelligent enough to move away from falsehood when they find falsehood. So bloggers and so on can only go so far as they are credible. When they slip into falsehood, sooner or later, the influencer loses his or her influence. So, and that's communication, really. I mean, people trust those whose information they can believe in or that are verifiable. So, but the thing about professional media institutions, established, known organizations, is that they clean up material, they verify information. So whether or not a minister prefers the established media or not, they don't do themselves very well if they think only their blogs, can make a difference. In any way, we may also look at bloggers as columnists of old, except that columnists of old were limited because the newspaper space was limited. Even with columnists, you can see that, and I think Nana here can vouch that there have been so many columnists who have fallen by the wayside, but so many columnists have endured, have actually influenced government policy, social movements, and citizens generally. That's why people like Elizabeth Tohini continue to write. If any of these persons had faltered in the past as unbelievable columnists, they wouldn't even dare continue to write. The papers they write for would have rejected them long ago. So the role of the established media is to put themselves in positions of trust, so much so that the public will continue to depend on them to verify the authenticity of what they see on social media. So, yes, social media platforms may influence people, but only for a while, if the information, if the material is not credible. It is only that sometimes, if we are not careful, some such disinformation could create havoc before we all are open to the truth.
And that's the expert on media and society, Professor Kakari, who himself is not on social media. So let's take some of your interactions here, and I'll read some of your messages. We'll also take some questions coming from online. So if you have any questions, may I take your questions? Or if you are not ready, I'll read some messages, and by the time I'm done, hopefully you will have a question. This one says, I did watch black and white coverage even as of 2001 from our analog Samsung TV set. That's from Bismarck, Frimpong. Xavier says, Prof is very experienced and he's one of the people we need for inclusive governance and development. From Eric Ahianyo says, I'm impressed by the genesis of GBC's transformation. This one from Kumbundo says, I watched black and white, not because there was no color TV then, but because black and white TV set was all we could afford. Pa Kofi says, Jifa, Ghana went color in 1985 or so, and in the rural areas, people will paint their TV screens with rainbow colors so the images will be seen as being colored. Akwesi Ntweje writes, Prof still remembers the number of gallons of diesels the transmitters consumed at the time. Sharp guy. Their generation is good with numbers and dates. Nancy Owusuwa says, I'm glad to learn so much from Prof. He's full of experience and wisdom. And MTN, this presentation has been much needed. I'm glad to be a part of it. From Samuel Owusun Kwantabisa, Prof is a great asset to learn from. Thank you, MTN, for such insightful discussions. Eugene Davis says, Prof, a very profound point on professionalism, and the state media is not doing enough to question authority. Rosalind Osei Asiedu says, critical journalism versus professional journalism. The confusion is the bane of our public discourse. Prof, you commended the state media, but could you help us on your take on the independence of the state media and how that can be enhanced? So Rosalind, I'll come back to that question after we take questions from the in-studio guests. Yes, sir, please come to the mic and you can sanitize and then please ask your question. I think you need to switch on the mic.
Hello. Yeah. Prof, my question has to do with conditions of service of media practitioners. We are talking about the way media practitioners have to be professionals. Or is there any link, or is there any way, poor conditions of service can affect media in their professional work? Or is there any way that even though they might be professional, but in terms of the way they are treated, their condition of service can have any effects on the way they go about their work? Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'll take a second question. Anyone? Any takers? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And Prof, I think I am particularly interested in the High Life group, so I'll come around to be a member. Thank you. Okay, so my question is, from what you have said, how would you describe the state of the Ghana media today? Has social media made it worse or better? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other question? All right, so two questions. Is there a link between professional journalism and remuneration? And on the High Life, actually, Prof and Dr. Kutin are sponsors of a band, Gonje.
Yeah.
Yes, and I remember them. So Prof has always been a lover of music from way back when. So the second question, the state of our media, has it been made worse or better because of social media?
Okay, to start with that, I think overall, generally, our media have not been corrupted much by the negative, by those negative publications on social media. There have been some slips here and there, but generally, if you take those media that are truly professional, the mainstream media in this country, and you can name them, the ones that we all consider are the more established and professional and independent state media or private, I don't think that overall they've been corrupted by social media content. And that, I assume, is because they are professionals, and therefore they make sure they authenticate whatever information they get from whatever source the information is coming from. For the smaller, less professional media, even when you are driving sometimes and you keep changing the dial, occasionally you might come on some information that that those radio stations are broadcasting, picked from social media, that are pure rumor, baseless, and not authentic. Certainly, most of our media occasionally take material from social media. But again, the material from social media is not only what individual persons put out there. They may put out information such as statistical information or information on health, such as on the pandemic, that may not be very authentic or that may not be reliable. Those things slip through here and there. But again, I'm sure I'm not wrong in saying that overall, social media content that is negative, that is not reliable, has not succeeded in making our media completely unreliable. I think in that sense, our mainstream or traditional media, radio, TV, and newspapers have kept social media in that sense at bay. But again, as Jifa pointed out, the mainstream media are also on social media as other additions. You have a radio station, you have a newspaper online, on Facebook, or on this or on that. And that's how it's supposed to be. But in terms of material that is not wholesome, that is not reliable, creeping into mainstream media, I don't think whatever has happened is so overwhelming as to make us really worry about the quality of media content that we consume. Now, the question on conditions of service and whether or not it influences or impacts on professionalism in media, I'll say yes, it does. And we have evidence all over Africa, particularly, to show that low levels of income have serious effects on levels of professionalism. Again, a part of the problem is the larger economy that our media operate in. In most of our African countries, the media are really on shoestring budgets. They are set up by individual business people whose capital is limited. And they are also set up in districts or locations where the economy is poor. Somebody called in now from Eagle FM. Eagle, yes, in Wale Wale. I've been there, I've worked with them, I've worked with a number of such radio stations in many parts of the country, from Tufuprasu to Wa to Tumu, and so on and so forth. And you can see how they are struggling. The owners don't have the money, for instance, to buy them even bicycles to go out and look for news. The owners don't have the money to employ graduates from GIJ, School of Communication Studies, or wherever. So the economies of these media organizations are such that their output cannot be that professional. And so it gives rise to all manner of challenges. Some stations I know in many places, even including some in places like Accra, just tell the journalists, go and find your daily bread. And that's what, so they go out, and therefore what happens is that if I want my news to come on radio at 1 o'clock, I'll give you 50 CDs. Because in any case, if you don't take the 50 CDs, you don't have money to take trotro and go home, or you don't have money for chop money for that day with your family, and so on and so forth. But sometimes too, I've seen some radio stations with really wealthy business people, but who don't pay a dime, who pay them miserably, because they are just exploiting the people. And the Ghana Institute, the Ghana Journalists Association have for a very long time tried to become a union. And if it became a union, then they could negotiate for minimum wages for people in the media. I don't know why they have not pursued that whole process. But because the journalists also don't have a common mouthpiece, different media owners treat them very differently. Now, if you listen to radio and if you watch television, you can see the differences in the quality of the journalists that are working in these media houses. There are journalists with PhDs working in some of these media houses, master's degrees like Jifa here, who are working in these. I mean, if those establishments were not well endowed, they can't employ her because they can't pay her. And if you employ somebody like Jifa, who not only is she well educated academically and intellectually and so on, but has a wealth of experience, Joy FM, GBC, and so on. You can't pay such a person decently if you are not well endowed. Some of the media houses, as I said, are in places where there is no advertising, and media is sustained on advertising. How do they survive? How do they, become professional? Being professional is having the resources to go and look for the news. Being professional is having the resources to organize programs, produce programs, well-researched with the human resource, the artists and the panelists and so on, well organized. Sometimes providing some incentive to the guests you bring into the studio and so on. Go and look at some of these radio stations around the country. They are set up in a room not bigger than where Jifa and I are sitting. You should look at the console they are using. You should look at where they've set up as a discussion room. Very difficult. Yet, the owners have the passion to want to do something for the community. That is why some of us have advocated for a fund, a media development fund, not charity, but for instance, a loan fund which is not, the interest rates are not based on what the mainstream banks are charging, but something that small media owners can tap into and pay over a decent period of time. That may also add up to improving the professional standards of our media. If so many media owners don't have the capital to do a good job, you cannot have the kind of quality that society demands.
All right. We have some more questions, but does anyone have a question here? Okay, you have a question? Yes, madam. Please come to the podium. So, Prof, you have lots of questions online, so once we take the last question, then it will just be the question and answer session. Please switch on the mic.
My name is Albert Samoti. I'm a photojournalist at Telegraphic. As a professional, and you said you are not really on social media, what advice will you give to people like yourself who are thought leaders and experts to come on social media and use social media judiciously, because your thoughts are needed there? Because social media is the future.
It is the today too.
Yes.
So will you rethink joining social media?
Actually, I have not been on social media because I think it would take too much of my time. That is the only reason.
That's the only reason.
Otherwise, I think it's a very important technology that, as you said, whoever has something to say must be there. Otherwise, you are really out of the public discourse.
Well, we also have people on social media who are wrong people. They only read only people.
Yeah.
So they come just to follow the trends and the conversations and all that, yes. So we have some other questions for you, Prof. So let's take them. This one, so there was a question, an earlier question about, can you talk about how the state-owned media can own the independence given them by the Constitution? Because I think the view is that they self-censor a lot.
No, that's a very important question. Yes, the Constitution gives them a lot of rights, and in fact, a lot of power. But you see, democracy, as with all societies, must be taken up by the people themselves. The Constitution is there. What do our managers, how do our managers and our editors take those rights? If our state-owned media continue to allow themselves to be bullied or to be influenced wrongly or to be directed by government, when the Constitution says there should be no interference from government, I will not blame government. Every government under the sun will want the media to do their bidding. Do you think Akufo-Addo wants media that will not support his policies? Even a liberal-minded politician aside, he wants the media to say what he wants. That's for every government, every leader, every institution. Why do institutions, organizations pay for public relations? Why do they pay for advertising in the newspapers? Nobody wants negative publicity about them. In fact, nobody wants criticism about them of what they are doing. That is why Ghanaians have coined this very intriguing concept, constructive criticism. Only Ghanaians can construct something like that, really. You see, so it is up to the human beings who are editors, who are appointed as editors, as managers of the state-owned media, to say we are taking up the challenge of being independent, and whoever it is, whether it's the president, minister, district chief or executive or whoever, when you want us to do A, B, C, D, we will not do it and stand up to it. The National Media Commission is there to protect you. How many managers, editors, journalists of the state-owned media have challenged any such thing? As chairman of the board of directors of Graphic, some reporters, some editors have come to me complaining about certain attempts by certain government officials to influence them or to wrongfully criticize them and so on. Now, I tell these people, listen, if you tell me this, me, Kwame Kakeri, sitting here, I can go to any of those public officials and reprimand them that what you are doing is against your own oath of office. But will you own up? Will you give the evidence? Will you, when you are called, will you say, yes, it is me and you? But nobody wants to own up. You see, so let us always look at the media as part of the general society. Journalists cannot be above society. They are part of us. They are part of our constitution, our composition as citizens. How many people here would dare raise a finger of criticism at a district chief executive or even a party officer? You know, so this is a culture that influences our media practice. People still fear government, and it is for good reason. You could lose your job, you could be harassed. Even in the Fourth Republic, democratically elected governments could be mean, you see. So, but I think that with all of that, our state-owned media have not been used as propaganda tools by any of the governments that we have had. And that, I think, also speaks to the professionalism of the journalists who work in these media organizations. At least they've walked the tightrope and tried not to be used as when the military were in power. Because, for instance, if you open the graphic, if you listen to GBC, you'll get information, you'll get the perspectives of the MPP, you'll get the perspectives of the NDC in opposition, which is important. In the past, if you were opposition, you were a pariah.
No space.
No space for you. I have read memos to media organizations from Achampon's time where the Commissioner of Information had sent instructions to editors and to the Director General of Ghana Broadcasting Corporation during the time they were having problems in the society that they should not cover anything about market women. It's there, it's on the file, I read it, and a number of such other things. Even some individuals, commissioners of information, wrote to the Director General, editors, that don't cover such person, even if he does the most for society. But it is not like that today. No minister today dares, no Minister of Information dares put a pen to paper and say this or that. In fact, if a Minister of Information is to call about a particular story and so on, they are likely to do that in a more civil way, in a way of appealing to you, rather than the rough and ready type under military regime. So we've made some progress.
Yes, we've made some progress. Thank you very much. And it's the 2021 Bright Conversations with Professor Kwame Kakari. We'll come back. Thank you all for your questions and for your contributions. We take a quick commercial break and we'll come back with more of your questions. And once we have some time, we'll do a wrap up with Prof on his Africa adventures.
Yellow! Today we have a very big surprise for all of you. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. You so open a sonata if you want it. You get a sonata. Sonata. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. And you can get a sonata too.
Everyone's excited about the MTN Act 25 promo. Just keep using your MTN number and talk, text, browse, and more to gain points, and you could win one of 25 Hyundai Sonata vehicles and cash prizes each month in the MTN Act 25 promo. Dial *156# today and begin your journey to win big.
Hey, man, try.
Only on MTN. Everywhere you go. Terms and conditions apply.
We have a very big surprise for all of you. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. You so open a sonata if you want it. You get a sonata. Sonata. You get a sonata. You get a sonata. And you can get a sonata too.
Everyone's excited about the MTN at 25 promo. Just keep using your MTN number and talk, text, browse, and more to gain points, and you could win one of 25 Hyundai Sonata vehicles and cash prizes each month in the MTN at 25 promo. Dial *156# today and begin your journey to win big.
Hey, man try. Nakawaham.
Only on MTN. Everywhere you go. Terms and conditions apply.
Bright Conversations. Thank you very much for staying with us throughout. So first, let me announce that we have an event survey. It may have been sent to you by phone. Please take some time to fill the survey. It relates to this event, and we're happy to hear from you and take your thoughts as well. I also told you earlier that we will be rewarding those who are participatory here and also online, and the names of the winners have come through, so I'll announce them, and I'm sure the MTN team have a plan for you. So let's congratulate Solomon Ama. Please, a round of applause. Wisdom Kwatsanu, Rosalind Osei Asiedu, Swalihu Yakubu, and Nancy Owusua. Please send your numbers. Those of you who have mentioned your names, the winners, please send your numbers in the private box from the online platform. So don't put it on the entire platform for everyone to see. Send it privately so that the MTN team can acknowledge you and reward you. And it's still the Bright Conversations with Professor Kwame Kakari. He's been answering our questions, and we do have more questions that have come online, so let's take a look at them. There was one question that I can immediately remember from the top of my head, where the questioner asked, has the local language journalism, has local language speaking FM stations contributed to professionalism in media? That's from Frederick. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. No, it's a very vital question. It's a very, very important question. There are many issues in this simple sounding question. It's very loaded. If we want to unpack all the issues there, we might sleep here. But let me say straight to the point that what the use of our languages on radio has done is also adds to opening up the space for freedom of expression, in that many of our citizens who are not good or comfortable with using the foreign language are able to participate in some interactive conversations on radio or television. However, in terms of the journalism of it, we still have a lot of problems with the use of Ghanaian languages in broadcasting.
Would you say that that's a growing space, or it was a good space up to a time and then we didn't pay enough attention? Because GBC had local language broadcasts. Some of the leading lights in local language broadcasts were the ones who even started for private media.
Well, you see, GBC is exceptional in this, because GBC, the people who use Ghanaian languages there are trained to write and speak the language. They use what we call standard form of the language. There is a standard form of the language, there is colloquial language, and so on. But it's the standard form that is used in, that must be used in media. And GBC staff use the standard language because they are trained, educated in the languages, and they can speak it and write it. For virtually all of the the radio stations, TV stations that use the Ghanaian languages, they don't use the standard form of it.
They don't actually write
they
it.
Don't even, they can't write it. They can't write. Even those stations that are known to be using any Ghanaian language, most don't know how to write it and how to read it. They are only talking the colloquial language. That is the language of the streets, of the marketplace, and so on. They may be very eloquent in proverbs and this and that, but that's still illiterate. Illiterate in the sense that they can't read it and they can't write it. So a majority of the journalists using Ghanaian languages are illiterate in the languages. And that's a very serious situation, because many of these radio stations, for instance, when it is news time, it is the English that they are transliterating. They don't write the news in the language and therefore read it in the language. They are ad-libbing, you see, which is not very good for our youth who must also study and know the language. You know that many of us, you included, you just told us that you learned a lot of English on Sesame Street television. You see, and many of us also growing up, we learned language on radio. GBC used to have a 5-minute program every morning called...
yes, I remember. Professor Say's program.
Yes.
Everyday English.
Everyday English, yes. And so on and so forth. Even the Chi, the Ewe, the Ga languages. You know, for instance, GBC started Ewe broadcasting during the Second World War. And who did they recruit to do the Ewe broadcasting? Late Reverend Baita, you see. People like that, educated in his language, enlightened in his language, writing books in his language, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about professionalism, the National Media Commission has developed a guide to the use of local languages on air. I'm not sure any of these stations is using these things. You see, again, that problem is because this country, very unique in a very negative way, a country like this, we pride ourselves on democracy, and we have no broadcasting law. So there is no regulation of broadcasting, because any serious democracy, take Britain, you cannot go and speak any bogus English on air, whether it's private station or BBC. You'll be sanctioned by the regulator, you see, because they respect their culture, they respect their language. That is why they have British Council here to proselytize their language. That is why they have Alliance Française here to spread the French language. But we don't respect our own. You know, we are Africans, and the things that belong to us is something we don't respect. That's why the most basic cultural thing in life, language, we don't respect it. We don't teach it in our schools anymore. So how do you expect journalists who are using the language to know how to read and write it? We don't teach it in our schools. Journalists come from schools. And if they didn't learn the language, how can they use it? This is why most of these people don't know how to read and write the language. So, if we are talking about professionalism in the use of Ghanaian languages in our media, the first thing is for them to learn how to read and write it. Otherwise, you can't talk about professionalism if you cannot read and write anything you are going to present in media, whether it's print or TV or anything like that.
Another controversial question coming through from Solomon Ama. He asks, well done, Prof. Great insights shared on the media landscape in Ghana. What's your position on the advertising of juju, quick money, and fake pastors on our televisions, and the inaction of the National Media Commission in sanitizing that space?
Well, again, it comes back to the broadcasting law I'm talking about. Without a framework, the National Media Commission can do nothing. Besides, the National Media Commission, as was conceived, must be properly understood. I was a member of the first commission, 1993 to 1996, with Professor Kofi Kumado as our chair, and some other eminent Ghanaians like the late Alajete and so on as members. And you see, we were coming from a dictatorship that had really trampled on free expression and media freedoms. And so we decided that the National Media Commission, at least at the time, and in my view even today, should not be the kind of commission, regulator, that people say must have teeth. Teeth to bite what? To bite whom? In other words, I don't think we need a regulator that will start closing down radio stations, newspapers, and that sort of thing. That's not very good in my view. But that doesn't mean there should not be regulation. And you can regulate the media terrain without being authoritarian, without stopping media, without closing down radio stations. You can still exact responsibility and professionalism by so many means. But we need a broadcasting law that gives parameters to all of these.
So if in the law it says, for instance, this kind of activity cannot be advertised or put on TV, then at least then the NMC or anybody has a certain context to work from. But currently, because that doesn't exist, it's difficult to hold
the radio
some of
stations,
these people to account.
Yes, and plus they are looking for money. But again, this is where the owners and their concept of broadcasting comes in. You see that this kind of thing doesn't go on certain television stations or radio stations. It's because the owners are conscious of the sanctity of media content. So they are not going to open their airwaves to collect money for
a money doubler,
for a money doubler or something like that. There is a radio station in Kumasi. What's the name? There's a radio station in Kumasi. Once we went there to have some discussions with them, and the manager told me that they had given time for a so-called Christian pastor to come and preach, and he paid for the airtime. He said he had not always been in his office in the evening when this fellow went to preach on radio. So one time he was in his office in the evening when the guy was preaching, and the things he was hearing, he thought they were on some other radio station. So he looked at his radio again, and it was from his station. So he entered the booth and told the guy to stop and asked the producers to cut off the time, and told him, hey, Juicy Kanako, count. And so he replaced that guy with a Catholic priest, knowing that a Catholic priest, a Presbyterian priest, a Methodist priest, an Anglican priest, they would go by the Bible because they are trained to give, gospel that is decent, that is acceptable. Exactly. So he drove this guy out and returned his money. The same with this advertising of juju and so on. The owners have responsibility, even if there is no law. Why are they, even though there is no broadcasting law, why are they not using their radio stations to call people to arms? Because they have a sense that radio should not be used to foment violence. Similarly, but you see, again, we are talking about belief systems. And many of these people, this is where they dabble in.
But is there a link at all between these money doublers or, traditionalists appearing on television or in media in reference to the recent incidents, for instance, the Kaswa killings? There was one that happened in the Volta region where a young boy has also been beheaded.
And then the recent one in the Brown-Hafo.
Yes, and in Brown-Hafo.
Well, you see, in media studies, we cannot impute direct link between this and that. Let us remember that these kinds of things were going on long before radio pluralism came. In fact, ritual murders have been going on for, as long as our societies have existed. So we cannot strictly say that they influence such behavior. But what we can say is that the media should not highlight on violence, on negativity, on beliefs that harm society, because some beliefs harm society. Some cultural practices harm society. Media must be seeking the enlightenment of society and not the backward movement of society. We should be getting more and more civilized, better educated, and so on. And that is why media should not do certain things. So it's not so much that the media will influence people to be armed robbers if it shows films of armed robbery, or people will become rapists if they show whatever about rape and so on. But it's because the media must be making society move forward.
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to announce our winners earlier, Solomon Ama, Wisdom, Kwasanu, Rosalind, Osei Asiedu, Swalihu Yakubu, and Nancy Owusua. You are part of our online winners. Please send your phone numbers privately to the MTN team. You can send it online, but don't put it in the everyone box. Send it privately so that the MTN team can connect with you and give you your prizes for participation. Also, we have the survey, the event survey. If you've received that on your phone, please fill the survey for us so that we can continue to improve the program and make it better. More questions for you, Prof. This one is from an anonymous attendee. He says, Jifa, I'm of the view that one of the biggest threats to the development or result-oriented journalism in Ghana is media ownership. Almost all major private media platforms are owned by politicians or politically exposed persons. Do you think, and that is Prof, do you think this status quo can change to promote the real independent journalism required to cause a greater transformation? I know you've talked about, the ownership and all that, but will it ever change? I spoke with Ambassador Harunata, and he disagrees about politicians not being allowed to own media. He says it's a democracy. You would then be excluding another group of people from owning media. That's the counter argument. But I think this writer wants to know, will it ever change? Will a broadcast law change it, for instance?
Well, you see, society will take decisions, I hope, in a democracy that promotes the welfare and well-being of that society. So we cannot be absolute about many things. Whether or not this or that person should own this or that, I think will be determined by what happens. So far, the worst that the politicians owning media have done is to use the radio and so on to insult opponents, and also to create conditions where even if you are not in a political party, you are afraid to express your views because they will set the hound dogs on you on radio, insult you and insult even your grandmother who died 50 years ago. That is the worst they have done, and they are likely to do. But if, for instance, ownership by politicians translated into violence that really threatens the stability of this country, society can make a law that no politician from any political party should make a law. After all, there is a law that says that no person holding high political office should serve on the National Commission, for instance. You see, so some of these things cannot be absolute. Depends on what happens in society at any point in time. For instance, before the broadcasting boom, there was a directive that people in political parties, people in religious organizations, or religious organizations cannot own radio and so on. But now, the churches directly don't own. But there are people who are members of churches, mosques, who are preaching the different gospels and so on. So as for the ownership, you see, again, our democracy is young. But if you go to the advanced democracies in Northern Europe, in France, political parties everywhere have owned newspapers for a very long time, centuries. But now those media owned by those political parties add to a very enlightened culture of discourse, of intellectual development. The French Communist Party has newspapers that are not vitriolic, are professional, but expressing a different ideological stance on issues. So I believe that as we move along, society may come to discern between this and that radio station, and many of these politicians are likely to now retune their radio stations to do better and more than the directly partisan, oppositional, or partisan adversarial kind of thing. If you notice, you'll find out that because of public reaction and because of activities of monitoring and shaming insulters, like what the Media Foundation has been doing during elections, you will notice that from election year to election year, the insults are getting less. What we have also found in this research is that of all the insults, the one thing Ghanaian political parties don't do is use tribe to campaign or to solicit votes based on tribalism and so on, which is very, very important and very, very good and positive for this country. You see, so I believe that depending on developments in society, the owners, whether they are politicians or whatever, will use the media they own to respond to the needs of the people rather than the needs of their political parties.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. And we are just about to wrap up. And just, wrapping up comments with you, I know that you've done a lot of work as well on the Africa continent and places like the Gambia. I remember Yaya Jammeh specifically mentioning you and warning you to stop trying to promote free speech in his country. Well, we all know where the story ended. You've also done some work in Eritrea as well, and Eritrea remains Africa's hermit kingdom or state. Why don't we see much progress, and briefly, in terms of press freedom on the African continent?
I would say there's been tremendous progress, or there was tremendous progress at the end of the 80s to the end of the 90s, early 2000s. And by the way, some of the activities I've done on the African continent, my collaborator was Nana Jana Pintin. We were in Liberia and Sierra Leone during the middle of the civil wars there. What were we doing there? We were there, one, to help train journalists to use the media to promote peace, unity of their countries, and so on and so forth. We were there also to help protect the journalists from abuses. And so remember that in Liberia, for instance, about 15, 16 journalists were just shot by the rebels. Sierra Leone, the same thing. On the continent, the highest number of fatalities of journalists was in Algeria, where 55 journalists were murdered by the rebels and so on. We have been around these countries, Cote d'Ivoire, when they were in civil war, again, to help the media organize themselves to promote peace, and also to help protect them against the atrocities of the war. Because during these civil wars, the plight of journalists were at the lowest. And journalists were like cockroaches to these rebels and even the incumbent governments whose backs were to the wall. In Eritrea, after they seceded from Ethiopia, I went there to work with the Ministry of Information at the time to develop their media systems, to help them set up even the Ministry of Information itself and then the media system. And then whilst I was there, the then Minister of Information, Beraki was his name, he's now been in prison for over 20 years. He and a civil society organization that was also promoting media freedom decided that we organize a national conference on media reforms. So we organized a national conference. One of the recommendations was the opening up to private media in the country. So after the conference, and I had left, this was 1997, I think, a number of private newspapers, magazines, and so on emerged. And just about 6 months after that, the man who is now a dictator, Afwerki, and his government arrested all of them. It was like, okay, I am watching those who will emerge, and then I snuff them out. So it's a very bizarre, very cynical politics that came out. But you see, the Afwerki's dictatorship and the rounding up of fellow ministers, journalists, and so on was because the party members were demanding that they go by the constitution that they had held a referendum to adopt for the country, and also hold a party congress that had not been held for many years. But the man, every dictator becomes a dictator because he has a coterie of supporters who hold him and then ward off others. So this clique took over, arrested all those who they considered could be critical to their agenda, and that's how come the media freedoms was also quashed there. As for Yahya Jammeh, now I'm sure he's languishing somewhere in Equatorial Guinea and looking left and right all the time of his own shadow. The Gambians are looking for him to try him for all the atrocities. And in fact, so the Gambians have been advocating that Ghana hosts the trial. I don't know what the government will do, but when the Gambians were going through the worst period of the Jammeh regime and the murders of journalists and so on, well, Jammeh issued a persona non grata that if I ever came to the Gambia, I would be arrested and dealt with. Dealt with meaning killed or something. Of course, I never went to Gambia at the time. But the interesting thing is that around the same time, some 42 Ghanaians were murdered. And interestingly, now President Akufo-Addo was the then foreign minister. So we had a coalition here, Media Foundation and other organizations, and it is he we went to see and who actually activated the investigation into the whole thing. And then when Kufuor's government went out and Atta Mills's government came in, the matter continued, and I think Atta Mills's and John Mahama's governments also pursued it. But you know how these things work.
Yeah.
It take a long time. But it is after Yahya Jammeh ran away into hiding that there is quite some activity. There has been a truth and reconciliation process in the Gambia, and the outcome, one of the recommendations is to try Yahya Jammeh, and so
we wait and see. But yes, a lot of work you've done in that regard. And Prof, this is where we bring an end to the bright conversations we've been having with you. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives with us here in the office and online. At this point, let me just remind you to please fill the online survey and also prepare for the fastest finger competition. But at this point, let me call on Georgina Fiagbenu, who is the Senior Manager, Corporate Communications, to give the closing remarks for today's event. A round of applause for her as she approaches. Thank you.
We've all learned a lot. The discussions were exactly what we anticipated it to be. Very bold, deep, insightful, and a lot of thoughts that have been shared. I have so many short videos that I've taken. And I'm sure, and I've received a lot of messages from different platforms about how useful this has been. So, Prof, thank you so much for making time to be here, and to you, Jifa, too, for the excellent moderation. And to all our guests who came, especially our special guest, Mrs. Rose Kakari, Rose Mensah-Kutin. And I was telling her when I was a small girl, I used to hear about her. Now that I'm young, I've met her. So it's a pleasure to meet you, and also Prof's brother. And for all of you who came, thank you for being part of this very insightful discussion. And to Nana Apentin, who is our special advisor for this program. It's been a great time. And I'm sure that even after the session, like I always do, and I'm sure many people also do it, when we put it out on YouTube, we will go back again and learn more. So, Prof, thank you so much for coming and being a part of our 25th anniversary Bright Conversations. And Jifa, thank you for the very excellent work. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much, Gina Fiagbenu, the Senior Manager, Corporate Communications. And we're going to have the fastest finger competition, and this is where MTN credits numbers will be put on the screen, and you try and log it in quickly into your phone so that you can have some of the MTN credit free of charge. There's nothing better than free credit, I'm sure. So please get ready for the fastest finger competition. Can we have the numbers displayed on the screen? Thank you.
It's free credit for free speech.
But for those who are still with us, it's the MTN's Bright Conversations, and our special guest has been Professor Kwame Kakari. So, yes, fastest finger. The credit is on the screen, the lower third of the screen. So quick. Has somebody got it? Are your fingers working fast? Anybody in luck? It's gone. Somebody has taken it. Who is the winner? Oh, who got it? Oh, the online, okay. Okay, the online people are faster. All right. Because they could actually just, if you are on WhatsApp web, you could actually just copy it and log it in.
Yeah.
That's really, next time we have to be online. So do we have more of the fastest finger? 2 more. I'm told we have 2 more left. So please keep watching for the numbers. And just to say thanks to Prof once again for sharing his experience, providing us a lot of insightful conversations, encouraging all of us to also know that whether you're a journalist, whether you're an ordinary citizen, there's a place for you in the democratization process for information. So whatever information you have, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a journalist, there are always ways to put it out there to contribute to the society. And we also acknowledge all the work you've done with Media Foundation. Your successor, Suleiman Abrahima, has been doing wonderful, wonderful work, and we appreciate what he has been doing as well. So has everyone got the fastest finger? No. Nobody in, oh, so it's only the online people. You can't get it here. They are faster. They are. All right, so are we done with the fastest finger competition? 1 more. All right. You are done. Okay, great. So once again, many thanks to all of you who joined us online via Zoom, via Facebook. Thank you all for your contributions and questions from the social media platforms, as well as those who presented their questions here at MTN's offices. My name is Jifa Bampo. Many thanks to you, and thanks to MTN for hosting this wonderful event. MTN at 25 years of brightening lives. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Cast your mind back 25 years.
It was very difficult for an ordinary person to own a phone.
We had to move around in person to do business.
The introduction of GSM, or the digital network, brought cutting-edge technology to Ghana, an unrivaled service that no one else could match.
Leadership.
As the market leader in an increasingly competitive mobile telecommunications industry in Ghana, with almost 25 million subscriptions, MTN offers its valued customers a range of exciting products and services under pay monthly and pay-as-you-go services.
MTN was the first to offer 3G services in Ghana, and this anniversary coincides with 25 years of GSM technology in this country, also known as 3G technology. Since then, MTN has pioneered several firsts, including the launch of mobile money and most recently 4G Plus, amongst others.
Integrity.
MTN is focused on providing excellent telecommunication services under the philosophy of improving access to economic empowerment.
My life is brighter with MTN.
MTN understands that the best way for us to gain a competitive edge on a local market is to offer different products and services which suit people's lifestyles and economic situations, whilst allowing them to enjoy the best solutions and offerings.
Relationship.
MTN's network coverage is extensive, covering all 16 regional capitals, major cities, and many rural and remote areas. MTN continues to invest heavily in infrastructure to expand its coverage and capacity across the country. MTN has more than 70 customer service centers and hundreds of local agents across the country. Equipped with a proven record of technological innovation and a corporate culture that thrives on understanding telecommunications in emerging markets, MTN continues to consolidate its leadership position in the country. 5 key values have contributed to MTN becoming the leading player in the telecommunications industry in Ghana.
Leadership.
Innovation.
Relationship. Integrity. A can-do spirit.
As industry leader, MTN reckons that the next phase of Ghana's telecommunications industry is in data offerings, and as such has laid the appropriate strategies that will propel the country into that regime.
And as we celebrate this major milestone, we say thank you to you, our customers, for staying with us throughout this period. Thank you to our people for all your hard work in bringing us to this point in our journey. Thank you to all our partners for your role in achieving this major milestone.
For 25 years, MTN has led the way in the telecommunications industry in Ghana. Today, mobile telephony is not just picking a phone and making a call. MTN service has ensured that it is much more than that. It is a way of making life brighter for our valued customers.
And that is progress.
That is progress.
That is progress.
Education,
Health,
economic empowerment.
At the heart of MTN's social impact activities is its commitment to the communities it operates in and its value of giving back.
The MTN Foundation was established in 2007 with the key objectives of doing good and contributing to the welfare of the communities in which we operate.
Commitment.
Since its establishment, the MTN Ghana Foundation in the last 10 years has invested well over $13 million across its 3 focal areas: education, health and economic empowerment.
Education.
In the area of education, we have building of classroom blocks, ICT rooms, libraries, robotic labs, and we also have provided scholarships to brilliant but needy students.
The Mtn Bright Scholarship was set up to award well-deserving students across Ghana to pursue various courses at different levels of education in Ghana. Over 12 million Ghana cedis have so far been awarded to 1,300 Ghanaian students.
After I got the scholarship, things moved very smoothly for me. Here I am today. Thank you very much. God bless MTN.
The Teachers Improvement Awards program was designed to support Ghanaian teachers in the first and second cycle public institutions to upgrade their education at the first degree or master's degree levels. Teachers who wish to pursue courses in English, mathematics and science are supported to complete their studies.
I don't know the word to use to express how excited I am because it has relieved me from my financial burden.
Thank you, MTN Ghana Foundation.
Thank you, MTN.
Health. In the area of health, we provide medical equipment, including incubators and other medical supplies, building of maternity blocks in hospitals. We have also built CHIPS compounds in various parts of the country. On Christmas Day in particular, we provide children and mothers born on Christmas Day with baby hampers to help them along. We also support vulnerable people with the cost of their surgeries.
Other initiatives in the area of health include the Save a Life campaign, which organizes the annual blood donation exercise and has remained one of the National Blood Bank's biggest contributions since its inception.
Economic empowerment.
In the area of economic empowerment, we have so far been able to do 12 projects in that area, and these include, among others, MTN Hitmakers. We have supported micro businesses in areas of shea butter production, palm oil production. We have also recently empowered over 100 youth in relation to the repair of mobile phones. They've been trained and equipped with kiosks where they have been provided with equipment, a bit of startup training to be able to engage in that area of the business.
Community service.
The MTN Heroes of Change program was launched to identify and recognize selfless people who continue to sacrifice their time and resources to improve their communities and brighten lives. Over 1 million Ghana cedis have been awarded to various winners to improve their projects.
Compassion.
Today, MTN is not just a telephony company, but a service that makes life much brighter for its valued customers. And that is progress.
That is progress.
And that is progress. And that is progress.
Hello.
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 Cast your mind back 25 years.
It was very difficult for an ordinary person to own a phone.
We had to move around in person to do business.
The introduction of GSM, or the digital network, brought cutting-edge technology to Ghana, an unrivaled service that no one else could match.
leadership.
As the market leader in an increasingly competitive mobile telecommunications industry in Ghana, with almost 25 million subscriptions, MTN offers its valued customers a range of exciting products and services under pay monthly and pay-as-you-go services.
MTN was the first to offer 3G services in Ghana, and this anniversary coincides with 25 years of GSM technology in this country, also known as 3G technology. Since then, MTN has pioneered several firsts, including the launch of mobile money and most recently 4G Plus, amongst others.
Integrity.
MTN is focused on providing excellent telecommunication services under the philosophy of improving access to economic empowerment.
My life is brighter with MTN.
MTN understands that the best way for us to gain a competitive edge in a local market is to offer different products and services which suit people's lifestyles and economic